Hi everyone, welcome to our EdTech Team online live with our teacher leader cohort. We're super excited to be talking about flipped and blended learning today. We have a special guest I'm going to introduce to you in just a minute. My name is Dominique Dines. It's fun to see a lot of people online with us live. And I'm going to go ahead and let Tracy just say hi to everyone before we get started.
Hi everyone, Tracy Purdy. Very excited to have you guys join us. I'm really excited for Dee to be joining us and sharing his expertise today as well. So please make sure if you have any questions, you can either post them in the YouTube feed or you can tweet them out using EdTechTeam Online, the hashtag EdTechTeam Online. And I'll be asking or interjecting those questions as we go. So thanks for joining us.
Awesome. And as I mentioned, we have a special guest with us today. We're super thankful for Dee Lanier, who's joining us from North Carolina. Did I get that right?
Yep.
And Dee's a great friend. We've worked together at different EdTech Team summits, and he's just doing a lot of awesome things with students in his neck of the woods. So Dee, go ahead and tell us a little bit about your background and what your current position is.
Sure. So I'm an EdTech coach and STEAM specialist at Charlotte Lab School. And I have to say this, Dominique, I don't know if you remember the very first time we met was actually doing Mystery Hangout with our students.
That's right. I forgot about that. That was a long time ago.
Yep. So I'm a STEM specialist to really help not only our students, but our entire staff in incorporating technology in their lessons. And I will be taking on an unofficial, or should say unofficial title of Director of 20% Time for middle school next year.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. And so you'll be getting to do a lot of maybe like PBL or 20% inquiry-based learning stuff as you're moving into that position. And all of our teacher leaders who are in the cohort, we just took a PBL course right before this one.
Nice.
So we now have some experts in the group as well.
Awesome.
But as we're looking at flipped and blended learning, how have you seen or maybe used that yourself in the classroom?
Yep. Well, so a little confession to make. I got started doing flipped learning well before that was a phrase that I was familiar with. I want to say around 2010, 2011, I started making my lessons to where all of my lessons were accessible online, that my lesson plans were detailed out on a Google Doc that was also on a public Google site. And so that was really for the students to be able to just walk through the lessons and do everything on their own, as well as to answer questions that parents may have, for students to be able to do things at home. And for the most part, I got started in doing that really to solve the problem of, boredom in the classroom, students hating just listening to you talk, but then also fatigue on my end, having to answer the same question over and over and over again. I mean, it was just absolutely exhausting. And so I did everything I could to try and remove all of those barriers. And so I would give, and I still do this, I probably give a 4 to 5 minute presentation at the beginning of class and really set up my classes to where everything is challenge based. And so then they go. And then we have some regroup and some share time at the end.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, and that you were super innovative with this before it was even like a hot, I don't know, like hot word in education.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned you started doing it just to kind of avoid fatigue. And I think a lot of times teachers, as they're looking at flipped learning or flipping their classroom, it kind of feels overwhelming and like it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But you're actually saying that in the end, it's not as much work. Would you say that, or you just said to avoid the fatigue?
I would say it's a different kind of work, right? Like it put all the emphasis on me, on the design of my lessons, and really with an open, just try to think of it that way, is with open lesson plans and giving my students the ability to comment on the lessons. They pointed out all of the problems, right? If there were any mistakes, they would point them out. And so it really allowed me to just fix those problems and to have those lessons better prepared for maybe the next time I taught that lesson. Maybe it would be the next hour with another class. So that was one part. And another part was I started making certain lessons really for a global audience in mind. And so if I wanted to teach my kids how to blog, I would just think, why don't I just create a blog on how to blog and open that up for my teachers and send the same link to my students. And so it's still a lot of work in a sense, but it just checked off many boxes all at the same time.
Yeah.
This is just doing something one and done. And then, like I said, answering questions, the same question over and over and over again in class.
Mm-hmm. No, that's awesome. So you mentioned a few different benefits there. What are some other benefits of changing up the instruction and trying something like this?
Yeah. Well, I think number one, it allows the students to really become problem solvers, because if you've given them the instructions that are there, then they really look to the computer as the number one resources they should go to in order to find solutions. And then therefore they only come to you, or they mostly come to you for clarification, right? Which are things that are always helpful to you as an instructor, or if they're having technical difficulties, or if they have a personal issue. And so it really, for me, also reduced my class management issues. And then the biggest thing for me is I started seeing the benefits for students that weren't in class for whatever reason. I mean, I taught for 6 years in a full Title I environment, and for whatever reason, I have certain kids that would not come to class, and but them being able to log in and to do their work really became something that we really took over in our school environment. And I can even share a really terrible, but then turned out to be a great story of an example of what happened at my first school.
Yeah, that'd be great. We'd love to hear.
So I taught an after-school class, and like I said, this is in a Title I environment. And so you can imagine many of the kids didn't even want to be there. And it was a class for kids that needed an extra hour or two in order to graduate. And so they really didn't want to be there. But when I started putting my lessons online and detailing the instructions and having links to videos and really setting it up so that they can go at their own pace and do it on their own, that's when first I almost got in trouble. Right? I got called in by the principal, and she asked, if students are able to do all their work online, then why are we paying you to stay here after school? But then the unfortunate event happened, and that was one of my kids. She was hit by a car on her way to the bus stop, which is right across the street from the school. So she had to cross, all of my students had to cross a busy intersection in order to get to the public bus. And so it happened around winter time. So it was night, it was dark, and she was out of school for about 8 weeks.
Wow.
And because my lessons were already online, she was able to continue her work. And then that same principal was critical at first, asked, how could we set up the other teachers to be able to do the same? And so immediately we started working on getting all of the teachers having a Google site, using Google Docs and publishing all of their lessons online. And then for any of those students with extended absences, we allowed them to have access to Google Hangouts so that they can chat directly with the teachers.
Oh,
and
that's awesome.
that other student, she would come in via video webcam. And so she would listen and watch my little 5-minute thing in the beginning. And I would use a tool like Screencastify in order to record it as well. And then just pop that link in so that she and others could just look at them later.
That's awesome. So you were really a trailblazer in getting your school, I guess, just started and making this available to all teachers.
Yeah. I guess so.
And I've heard, you mentioned if students are out for like an absence or something. I know that Minnesota, where Tracy lives, there's snow days, and that, with different weather around the world, like it's nice to have these resources online and to have everything ready to go.
Absolutely.
And Screencastify is one of the many tools that we talk about in this course and encourage the teachers to use. So as our teacher leaders are getting ready to try all these new things and then trying to flip the instruction in their classroom, what sort of advice do you have for them?
I would advise really setting up lessons as challenges, right? And so thinking of ways to gamify, thinking of ways in order to really gain the interest of the kids so that they have something that they can accomplish at the end of completing it, instead of a worksheet, right? Or anything which is just rote memorization or just reading without any sort of response, right? Anything that has a sense of challenge and completion, and then short snippets. And so if there's any instruction, that those instructions come in short snippets versus just a very long dialogue, right?
Yeah, no, that's awesome, Dee. I love that advice. And you mentioned gamification, which we don't talk a ton about in the course, but I know that you're doing some pretty awesome stuff with Smashboard. Do you want to tell us a little bit and maybe even share your screen if you have it ready?
Sure. Yes. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I love talking about Smashboards. And Smashboard EDU is the website, smashboardedu.com. And things have gotten so cool lately of having lots of other teachers and educators giving feedback. We've actually even changed the hashtag to Smashboard EDU. If you look that up online, literally just started using that like minutes ago. Like you can see something that hasn't been changed right here. But Smashboard, if you can see the screen, it really, it walks students or whatever age learner through the design thinking process in order to accomplish a goal. And so if you're familiar with the design thinking process, it has very technical terms, right? Empathy, defining the problem, ideate or ideation. Those are good phrases and good terms, but especially with younger learners, they may not, remember them. And I try and teach my kids every day is party time is a good way to remember as an acronym. But made it real simple and just say ready, set, go, and show. Like that's the process. And so created this board, and there's a couple of different templates that can be used if this is a shorter one, right? Where ready is just the problem that needs to be solved. And so I have this hyperlink over to a specific problem that needs to be solved. And then set, typically this is where I'll introduce either a set application or maybe even some random apps that can be experimented with in order to solve whatever this problem is. And then they have time to do it, and then they have to display it. And here's another template. This is the latest template I've been working with. But if you're on my website, you can see some of the Smashboards that we've set up and used for 4th and 5th grade students, most especially have used this past year. And then
those are awesome.
My daughter created for Mother's Day.
Oh, cute.
Yeah.
No, those are awesome. And so you're using these, or these could be used like in a flipped or blended learning environment?
Absolutely. So the biggest thing is they're learning the process. That's my goal, is to teach them the process and how to problem solve. And so whether it's a problem that I give them or it's a problem that they come up with on their own, which is what I'll be doing with 20% time next year, is they'll have to identify what is the problem they need to solve and who does it affect, and really spend some time just really narrowing down the problem and then investigating other opportunities in order to solve that problem. And then, of course, doing it and then showing what they did. And this last template was just most recently created to show the cyclical format of even after you've completed this whole process, then you have more problems that need to be solved. And so start the process again.
That's great. No, I love that. And I love that people can create their own copy from your website. So it's a great resource. We'll be sure to share it out with everybody.
Absolutely.
Live or who watches this later. And
yes, this template will give you everything you need.
That's great. And so this is all just created in Google Slides?
Yes.
Okay.
Everything's in Google Slides.
I love that. Yeah, because we're all familiar with that. And so that's something we can get started with as we're thinking about flipping our classroom or changing things up. We did want to take a few minutes for questions. I did just jump on the live feed. We do have quite a few people joining us today, so that's awesome to see. And I see a few different questions. I don't know if Tracy, you have this one. How do you integrate student collaboration and working together with flipped learning?
So that's actually an expectation. Glad that question came up. I should screen share this. One of the things that I do is I actually give all of my students a physical piece of paper that's a card, and it's called an SOS card. And so you may have heard of the ask three before me rule.
Mm-hmm.
But I use that really to encourage the students and really mandate it, to be completely frank, that they use one another. So that this is what the SOS card looks like. And so on the front, they're all handed one of these cards and they write their name on it. And then on the back, it reminds them that they can only use this card once. And so if they choose to use it, then they then lose it. Because I need them to go through the process of first asking their peers for answers to questions, to doing research with other resources. You know, it may be in class work that they already have. It may be a link to a website, you know, whatever it may be. And then obviously to search. And I started doing something like this early on in my blended learning because students would ask questions regularly. They'd sit right next to someone else who clearly knew the answer because they were farther along. And so I found that quite frustrating.
Right.
So decided to create a tool that reminded them that it was literally part of the rules that they asked for help from someone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I love the SOS card. I've never seen that before. But it's a great concept. I know lots of teachers are doing something similar, but that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Find the students.
Yep.
We have another question. How did your students without access to the internet or devices at home access your lessons and do the homework?
This was a big one. I realized that I had to actually take, it's the wrong terminology, I want to say dumb down, but I had to take down some of my expectations on some of my lessons and really start asking the question first and foremost, how accessible are my lessons from this device versus a laptop? And so I literally did surveys in my class and asked my kids how many of them had access to the internet via phone. And you know, we're talking about low income students, and easily over 90% of my kids said that they did have access via phone. So then I had to start making sure that my lessons were accessible from this device. And so making sure that everything that I used was mobile friendly, and then also reducing the expectations of how much they did. And so it was more consumption based. And so if there's any work that was needed to be done from home, it was more of the consumption, right? The reading or the viewing, and then they come back to school in order to do the writing or producing of whatever product.
Yeah, that's great. We have people who are super grateful for you addressing this.
Yeah, no, I'm very passionate about that.
So when you're using a phone, for example, at home instead of maybe a laptop or a computer that you have at school, what sort of tools did you use to flip the instruction?
Google Forms, right? Google Forms, that was the big one, just as a check-in. It started for me when I taught business for a number of years, and I would have my students do a current event, right? So, you know, the typical, right? Remember, you used to have to do this, right? Read a current event and then write on it.
Yeah.
And I had to just take things all the way down to the simplest form and say, okay, so how about just once a week instead of every night? They're responsible for reading or watching even online one thing and then writing 3 or 4 sentences really as a check-in. And so that's all that homework expectation was really as a check-in to see that they actually did engage something. And then we did our classroom lessons that gave them more access because we had the access there.
Okay, so you mentioned Google Forms and watching videos. Are there any other tools or program that you use to get the students' response to the questions during a video? or was it always after the video, or how did you?
Yeah, I typically use Google Forms because it was the simplest and easiest. I mean, nowadays, there's so many different tools that are out there, right? But they also require oftentimes apps. And so like, I'm a big fan of Edpuzzle, right? Like I love Edpuzzle, or even, everyone right about now has Flipgrid fever, but I'm still very cognizant of if the application requires an install of an app, because many times a kid is actually being asked to do something and they're borrowing their parent's device. And so I am aware of tons of tools that are out there, but I'm also very aware of my students. And that's really what I think the very first question needs to be asked is what do your students have access to? And then leveling up from there. And so taking things down to the bare minimum, right? If I know that my website is mobile accessible, and that I only require them to click on a link and to respond in a Google form, that is much simpler than I need you to install this app, I need you to watch through this thing, and right, like those become additional hurdles. And I'm willing to go through them, and I'm willing to use them if I'm confident that my kids can. But I think it takes a little bit of work on my end.
Yeah, no, but that's a great answer. And I think we do need to remember it's about the students and the tools and the access that they have.
Absolutely. Also not afraid to, I've made plenty of administrators mad, including my own, about advocating for at-home access. We collect data all the time on kids for state purposes. We need to know who qualifies for free and reduced lunch. Oftentimes we'll give kids discounts for other services based on their income level. And I'm like, well, there's another question, and that's access to internet. And so what are we doing in order to try and bridge that gap? And there's some great tools that are out there. I'm on my biggest campaign on promoting Kajeet EDU. So if you're not familiar with that, I would tell the audience Kajeet, Kajeet EDU. And so they provide devices, or there are devices that schools can get for their kids. And then there's also just a huge resource bank on different grants that can be pursued in order to help bridge the digital divide.
Awesome. Yeah, that's another huge issue, and something a lot of us have to deal with, right?
Yes, yes.
We've had the question come up a couple times about elementary students or elementary flipped tools.
Yes. This will be a simple one. This is a really small one, but a real simple one, because I think we think about flipped learning mainly around accomplishing, task, or, completing something that's for my class. But I think at home is really a great place where we can help develop skills for our kids that are utilized when they're back at school. And so probably the biggest thing that I push is for elementary school students to begin using Typing Club. I know it's a website, it's a tool, and there are others that are out there, but it kind of gamifies the typing learning experience. And so I often use that, or another one is for teaching programming is I'll use Tinker, spelled with a Y. And so again, utilizing that at-home time in order to build and develop skills so that when we're back in the classroom, I'm actually able to teach and the students are able to engage in the lessons easier because they've actually been developing their skills when they've been at home.
Yeah, no, those are great tips.
Yeah.
We have one more question here. What's the first step that people can take if you're less tech-minded?
Well, you can join the EdTechTeam online. Goodness, that's great. So it's very interesting. You think about the SOS card. One of the other resources that are there is YouTube. And I mean, no lie, how often have I learned things from YouTube? And it's amazing to even see how many unofficial channels exist just for learning different tools. And so sometimes it's just school-wide tools, or sometimes it's a tool that's referred to you by a colleague, and like, I have no idea how to use this, and using YouTube personally in order to watch a demonstration, to then pull up that application on your laptop or on your phone and to learn while trying and doing. I know that sounds, no pun intended, elementary, but that's definitely a really big tip, is just to jump on YouTube and to begin learning that way.
When I think so much of it just falls on our shoulders, right? Like just as our students are learning, we're, learning all the time as well. And students, I know that I always saw my fourth graders doing exactly what you said, looking on YouTube when they don't know the answer to something. And I think by the people joining this cohort and being part of this program, they've already taken that first step, to start making these changes.
I agree. And you just hit that big point, right, of having your kids teach you how. And I think having the kids teach you how by them teaching the entire community how, that becomes a great place.
Yeah, and empowering your students, for sure. We do have just a couple people requesting. Is there any way that people could get a copy of the SOS card? People really like that.
Yes, absolutely. So if you just go to smashboardedu.com, and if you make a copy of the template, which is right there on the website, in that template, there's the SOS card. There's all those instructions. Yeah, that's the thing. People are like, okay, that's Smashboard. Well, I'll dive into that later. I want that SOS card now. Feel free.
Yeah, no, but that's great, because that's a great way for people to kind of start diving in and seeing what that's all about as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Dee. I feel like you gave us tons of things to work with for this course, and we're super fortunate to have had this time just chatting and learning with you. So thank you. I don't know if there's anything else you want to share before we say goodbye.
Just that I appreciate you guys. I really do. And I'm sure that, just in the same medium, I'll jump on over to Twitter, and I know people have probably been responding online that way. And then this conversation can continue online, much like blended learning / flipped learning always happens, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, just jump onto our hashtag EdTechTeamOnline, and then please share out your hashtag as well. It was smashboardedu.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dee. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We'll see you all online soon.
See ya.